In today's world, the average new car is a mashup of many different technological innovations designed to help make life better for each customer. But sometimes, these innovative features are met with serious backlash from the general public. So in this video, we take a look at 10 car features and innovations that failed miserably. Buckled up, as some of these features might make you either nostalgic or wondering what the car makers were thinking. Pop-up headlights. Pop-up headlights were once the ultimate symbol of cool. Popular in the 1980s and 1990s, these headlights were hidden inside the car's body and would pop up when turned on. They gave cars like the Mazda Miata, Corvette, and Lamborghini Countach a sleek and futuristic look. However, the excitement didn't last, and pop-up headlights eventually became a failure. One major issue was their mechanics. The motors that lifted the headlights were prone to breaking, leaving one or both headlights stuck in the up or down position. This not only looked silly, but also caused safety concerns, especially when driving at night. Repairs were expensive and time-consuming, making the feature unpopular with car owners. Pop-up headlights also caused problems with aerodynamics. When raised, they created more air resistance, reducing fuel efficiency. This was a big drawback as cars started focusing on better performance and fuel economy. Another issue was safety regulations. By the 2000s, stricter pedestrian safety rules meant car manufacturers couldn't use pop-up headlights anymore. In an accident, the sharp edges of the raised headlights posed a danger to pedestrians. While they were stylish and fun, pop-up headlights became too impractical and costly to maintain. Ashtrays and built-in cigarette lighters. The inclusion of ashtrays and built-in cigarette lighters in cars was once a standard feature, but over time, it became clear that these features were outdated and unnecessary. Back in the 20th century, smoking was much more common, and car manufacturers saw the need to provide a place for smokers to light their cigarettes and dispose of ashes. The built-in cigarette lighter was a convenient tool for those who smoked, and the ashtray offered a place to dispose of the cigarette butts. However, as smoking became less popular and awareness of its health risks grew, these features became less relevant. By the early 2000s, most people had stopped smoking in their cars, and the ashtray was no longer needed. In fact, having an ashtray in a car was seen as outdated and unnecessary by many. The built-in cigarette lighter also became less important with the rise of portable chargers and the shift towards USB charging ports. Not only were these features becoming irrelevant, but they also took up valuable space in the car that could have been used for more practical things. Additionally, the presence of an ashtray in a car could be a turn-off for potential buyers, especially non-smokers. As a result, car manufacturers started removing these features from new models, replacing them with more modern alternatives like USB charging ports and extra storage compartments. Today, ashtrays and cigarette lighters are largely a thing of the past in most cars. Automatic seatbelts. Automatic seatbelts were introduced in the 1980s as a way to encourage more people to use seatbelts. The idea seemed smart at first. The seatbelt would automatically move into place when you closed the car door or turned on the engine. This was meant to save time and make buckling up easier. However, the reality turned out to be very different. One major problem was that these seatbelts were uncomfortable. They often felt tight or restrictive, making drivers and passengers dislike using them. Additionally, they weren't very practical. While the shoulder belt moved automatically, you still had to manually buckle the lap belt for full protection. Many people ignored the lap belt entirely, which made the feature unsafe in an accident. The design also had reliability issues. The motors and tracks that moved the belts were prone to breaking, leaving the belts stuck in one position. Repairs were expensive and complicated, frustrating car owners further. Another issue was safety. If the motorized mechanism malfunctioned in a crash, it could fail to properly secure the passenger. Over time, automatic seatbelts became more of a hassle than a convenience. When airbags became more common in the 1990s, automatic seatbelts were no longer necessary. Modern seatbelt designs, which rely on simple manual buckling, proved to be safer, cheaper, and more user-friendly. Retractable steering wheels. Ever wondered what you'd get if you mixed Star Trek with your dad's car? In the 1960s, Ford tried to answer that question with their retractable steering wheel, which they proudly called the swing-away steering wheel. The idea seemed pretty smart at first. Push a button and the steering wheel would slide to the right, making it easier to get in and out of the car without doing that awkward shuffle around the wheel. Chrysler jumped on the bandwagon too, creating their tilt-away steering wheel that would move up and to the right when you opened the door. It was like having your own personal butler making way for you to exit. Car companies thought this would be the next big thing, especially since cars in the 60s were basically land yachts with huge front seats. But here's where everything went wrong. First off, these systems were super complicated. Imagine having a bunch of motors, rails, and electrical connections just to move a steering wheel. When something broke, and it often did, fixing it cost more than most people's weekly paycheck. Plus, all those moving parts meant there were about 1 million ways things could go wrong. The biggest failure? Safety concerns. In crashes, these fancy mechanical systems could jam or break, making a bad situation even worse. By the early 1970s, simpler tilt and telescoping steering wheels took over. They were cheaper, more reliable, and way safer. Built-in car phones. Built-in car phones were once seen as a cool, futuristic feature in cars, especially in the 1980s and 1990s. These phones were installed directly into the dashboard, allowing drivers to make calls without needing a mobile phone. However, the idea quickly became outdated and didn't work as well as expected. First, the technology was limited. Early built-in phones could only work within certain areas, often relying on outdated cellular networks that weren't as reliable as today's mobile phones. The range was also restricted, so people often found themselves unable to make calls in certain locations, leaving the built-in phone useless. Another big problem was the cost. These phones were expensive to install and maintain. Drivers had to pay for a service plan specifically for the car phone, and the rates were often higher than those of regular cell phones. As cell phones became more affordable and available, it didn't make sense to keep paying extra for a built-in phone that was less convenient and less reliable. Finally, built-in car phones became a thing of the past as mobile phones grew more powerful. People no longer needed to rely on in-car systems because their mobile phones were portable, had better features, and could be used anywhere. The rise of smartphones only made these built-in systems even more obsolete. Which of these features do you remember seeing or using back in the days? What was your experience with it? Do let us know in the comment section. Hidden fuel caps. Hidden fuel caps were another stylish yet impractical car feature introduced in the mid-20th century. Car manufacturers wanted to create a sleek, uninterrupted design by hiding the fuel cap behind elements like tail lights, license plates, or body panels. While the idea looked good on paper, it caused more problems than it solved. For starters, hidden fuel caps were difficult to locate, especially for drivers unfamiliar with the car. At gas stations, this often led to confusion and delays as people searched for the hidden compartment. Gas station attendants, especially in the days of full-service fueling, also struggled to find the cap. This wasted time and created frustration. Additionally, these fuel caps were not as durable as traditional ones. The mechanisms used to reveal the hidden caps, such as spring-loaded panels or rotating tail lights, were prone to wear and tear. Over time, they often broke or jammed, leaving drivers unable to access the fuel tank. Repairs were expensive and sometimes required replacing parts that had nothing to do with the fuel system. Lastly, hidden fuel caps didn't offer any real functional benefit. They were purely aesthetic and added complexity to what should have been a simple task. refueling a car. Eventually, practicality won out, and hidden fuel caps were phased out in favor of more accessible designs.